Bolivia's national vaccination campaign was launched this Friday in Santa Cruz department. The UN officials have stressed that European Union's leaders failed to deliver on their promise to leave at least 20 million people out of poverty by the end of 2020. Anti-government protests continue in Lebanon due to the economic crisis aggravated by the COVID pandemic and the adoption of strict lockdown measures. Hello from the headquarters of teleSUR English in Caracas, Venezuela. This is From the South. I'm Janet Perez Moya. Welcome. The government of Bolivia started this Friday the national vaccination plan against COVID-19. According to health authorities, the immunization process began in the department of Santa Cruz, where health workers were the first to receive shots of the Russian Sputnik V vaccine. The government has allocated at least 1,421,000 doses acquired for the first stage of the inoculation to this department. The activity was attended by President Luis Arce, who emphasized his commitment to the medical personnel on the front line to fight the pandemic.
Together with our Ministry of Health, we proposed a plan to fight the coronavirus in this second wave. A plan that has stages, such as tests and more tests. A plan that has a second element, the provision of vaccines that today are a reality for our medical personnel, and based on this, a coordination to divide the expenses, to divide the resources, and the coordinated work among the three levels of the state.
Y en función de eso, una coordinación para dividirnos los gastos, para dividirnos las erogaciones de recursos.
Venezuela and Cuba strengthened bilateral ties in the framework of the official visits to Caracas of the Vice Prime Minister of the island, Ricardo Cabrizas, after the arrival of the Vice Prime Minister of Cuba, Ricardo Cabrizas, to Venezuela. The authorities of both nations held meeting at the highest level with the purpose of continuing reinforcing their strategic alliance to carry out programs and projects for the benefits of the people of both nations. The Cuban officials state that the Cuban and Venezuela Integral Cooperation Agreement is a model of cooperation for the world, forged in the internationalist vocations of both governments. Cabrizas also highlighted that in spite of the pressures, sanctions, and threats from Washington and its allies, projects and actions have been approved that have favored the economic and social development of these countries. This Friday is the fifth virtual meeting of the group Puebla, with the participation of leaders from 17 countries of the Latin American region. Participants are debating the Progressive Manifesto, a document that seeks to promote a model of development based on solidarity that guarantees the consolidation of Latin America as a zone of peace, ensures the continuity and strengthening of its democracies, and respect for human rights. They are also discussing strategies to advance in the reduction of social inequality in the region. Among the political leaders participating are President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, who during his speech advocated the need to rebuild Latin American unity.
It is essential for Latin America to be united once again as a whole, and to discuss again, regardless of the governments that in each case and at each moment are leading our countries. The important thing is that we understand that united we can achieve much more than separated. The pandemic has shown us what has been the result of all of us running against the unknown on our own side. It would have been much better to have a place where we could meet, where we could tackle the pandemic together, where we could even negotiate together the vaccines that are needed. And this shown that everything is more difficult divided.
During his speech at the fifth virtual meeting of the Puebla Group, Mexican Foreign Affairs Minister Marcelo Ebrard proposed to join efforts to restore technological autonomy to Latin America.
I believe that the most important lesson for us today, as Latin American and Caribbean unity, with a progressive approach, is to reinstate as the highest priority for us the development of our technological autonomy, on which our capacity to respond and our political strength, but beyond that, even our survival will depend, something that has been mentioned a lot, and I do not have to expand on it.
Last week, Brazil's far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's approval rating plummeted by 11%. Now a corruption scandal is driving it down even further than has triggered a new impeachment request. Brian Muir reports in Sao Paulo.
Brazil's far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has seen his popularity drop by 11 percentage points since the inauguration of U.S. President Joe Biden. Now, Bolsonaro was a fanatical supporter of Trump, and he denied that Biden had won the election until the last possible minute. He was the last foreign leader to recognize Biden's victory. As his approval rate has dropped from 37% to 26% in 1 week, a new scandal is driving it down even further. Despite being a congressman for nearly 3 decades, Jair Bolsonaro was swept into office on this image that he created for himself as a kind of simple everyman with simple tastes. And he's always talked about his favorite breakfast food being toast with condensed milk on it. 2 days ago, the federal government published its annual procurement data on the transparency page, and it showed that the president's office had spent around $3 million on condensed milk during the year 2020. To make it worse, this was done on a no-bid contract, and it was heavily overpriced at nearly $36 per small can of condensed milk, an item which costs about $1.50 in an average grocery store in Brazil. So people are making jokes, there's memes spreading around on the social media about Bolsonaro and condensed milk, but the fact is it's an example of criminal, impeachable offense. And as a result, the PT party and other left parties submitted the 56th impeachment request to Congressional President Rodrigo Maia against Jair Bolsonaro.
The UN top officials say the European Union leaders had failed to deliver on their promise to bring at least 20 million people out of the poverty by the end of 2020.
What we've learned from the past 10 years is that growth per se is not doing enough to reduce poverty. The Europe 2020 strategy that committed in 2010 to reduce the number of people in poverty by 20 million has failed. And it has failed because we considered that overall progress would benefit people in poverty by creating jobs that they could have access to. But this is not working. So we need a much more proactive stance, and to do this based on the experience, the lived experience of people in poverty who know much better than decision makers often what they need to overcome their predicament.
After the disagreement between pharmaceutical companies and the questionable management of some governments, less than 1% of the world's population has received the vaccine against COVID-19. Experts say that to achieve the so-called herd immunity and mitigate the crisis, between 70 and 90% of the world's population needs to be vaccinated. Experts also warn that the economic gap between rich and poor countries increases worrying and hinders the acquisition of the vaccine in regions such as Latin America and Africa. In view of this situation, the United Nations insists that the distribution of the vaccine developed by the different pharmaceutical companies should be equitable distributed in order to achieve balance and defeat the disease. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Zhao Lijian said Friday the international expert team dispatched the World Health Organization to Wuhan City is on a visit for exchange and cooperation, not investigation.
I would like to stress that this is an exchange and cooperation between international experts from the WHO and Chinese experts in the relevant fields on the origin of the novel coronavirus. It is a part of global research, not an investigation. The two sides have exchanged several times via video link during the quarantine of the WHO experts. They shared their respective research results, which laid a good foundation for deepening bilateral cooperation and contributing to global research in the next stage. We are neither scientists nor professionals, no matter whether we are officials or journalists. We should leave the extremely professional work of urgent tracing to experts, provide them with sufficient time and necessary space to promote relevant cooperation, give them full trust and support, and minimize unnecessary attention and interference. China will, as always, uphold an open, transparent, and responsible attitude, continue to cooperate with the WHO and make its own contribution to better preventing future risks and protect the safety and health of people around the world.
Around 40,000 doses of the Russian Sputnik V vaccine arrived to Belgrade airport Friday morning, boosting Serbia's speedy vaccination program. Serbia has embarked of one of the fastest vaccine rollouts in Europe, with some 400,000 people getting jabs so far in a country of 7 million people. Friday's deliveries supplement thousands of Sputnik V and Pfizer doses, which arrived earlier this month, alongside 1 million Sinopharm doses from China. Serbian officials said that so far their vaccine shipments have been negotiated directly with Russia, China, and Pfizer representatives in the US.
On February 11, we expect Russian experts to arrive, who will, together with our experts from the Health Ministry and Torlak Institute of Virology, Vaccines and Sera, talk about how fast they can start a distribution of this incredible vaccine in Serbia. Of course, during February and March, we are expecting deliveries of the remaining quantity of 2 million doses of the Sputnik V vaccine.
One of Prague's most iconic landmarks, the famous Charles Bridge, became the stage to a protest against coronavirus restriction on Friday, with some vehicles carrying anti-government messages left unattended overnight. The vehicles were clamped by the police for breaching parking restrictions. Among the vehicles, there was a blue van advertising the anti-government website sorryvilado.cc, which translates as "Sorry Government." The website said organizers of the silent protests do not agree with the national restrictions imposed to curb the spread of COVID-19. The Czech Republic reimposed COVID-19 restrictive measures ahead of Christmas due to rising infections, which includes the closing of bars, restaurants, and hotels. The government also imposed a nighttime curfew from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced trigger travel restriction in response to a new variant of the novel coronavirus and suspended air travel to Mexico and all Caribbean destinations until April 30. The government will introduce mandatory PCR testing at airports for people returning to Canada. The Prime Minister said those with positive tests will be quarantined immediately at designated government facilities to ensure they do not carry the new variants of the virus. Trudeau said his government and Canada's major airlines had agreed to suspend service to the Caribbean and Mexico, among them Air Canada, WestJet, Sunwing, and Air Transat. The new government of the United States has announced that it will evaluate former President Donald Trump's policies against the island of Cuba. The White House press secretary informed that the cabinet of President Joe Biden will examine the policies ordered by Trump against the Caribbean nation over the past 4 years. Official reports reveal that the Trump administration applied at least 242 sanctions against Havana in order to tighten the blockade. In this regard, the Cuban government has repeatedly denounced that Washington's hostile policies have reduced the flow of imports of essential goods, such as fuel or health material, in addition to the sanctions applied to the tourist sector, the country's main source of revenue. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a 5-year extension to the START nuclear treaty with the United States. President Putin signed the federal law of ratification that seeks to extend the treaty between Washington and Moscow, which relates to measures to reduce and limit their strategic offensive nuclear arms, first established in 2010. After a telephone conversation between the Russian and the US president on January 26, it was agreed that their respective working teams will fine-tune the details for the extension of the treaty until 2026. The nuclear disarmament pact limits the arsenal of the two powers to a maximum of 700 deployed missiles, as well as 1,550 nuclear warheads and 800 launchers deployed and in reserve. In Lebanon, the economic crisis aggravated by the COVID pandemic and the adoption of strict lockdown measures has led to the protests in the northern city of Tripoli this week, resulting in at least 400 injured. Anti-government demonstrations on many unemployed and struggling citizens have spread throughout the country since the beginning of the week, with major hotspots such as Tripoli as the country's experienced one of the most pronounced outbreaks of coronavirus in the world, according to health authorities. The health crisis has forced the government to impose a 24-hour curfew for an indefinite period. According to economists, this measure aggravates the economic crisis in the country, which lost 20% of its GDP last year, according to the International Monetary Fund. According to the United Nations, more than half of the population is now living below the poverty line. Social movements and political organizations have blamed the crisis on corrupt governments. Speaking at the World Economic Forum, Indonesia's Foreign Minister Retno Marsudi called Friday for the fair access to coronavirus vaccines for all countries, adding that the vaccine is not a political issue.
Equitable and fair access to vaccine for all countries is a very important issue. It is not only important for developing and least developed countries, but also important for developed countries and for the world. We recover stronger if we recover together. Gavi plans to pull 2 billion doses of vaccine. This is great. And it is this kind of spirit, the spirit of collaboration and cooperation that we need to continuously strengthen. So please stop the politicization of vaccine. Please stop the vaccine nationalism, and we must remind ourselves, vaccine is a humanitarian issue. Vaccine is not a political issue. So it is my hope that the vaccine multilateralism succeeds. Then what we can say, multilateralism delivers.
On Friday, health workers at the Rabat hospital were among the first to receive the coronavirus jab in Morocco, a day after King Mohammed VI kicked off the country's vaccination program. The vaccinations will take place in more than 3,000 centers across the country and mobilize more than 12,000 health workers. Morocco received its first shipment of vaccines dose in recent days from China, Sinopharm, and Anglo-Swedish company AstraZeneca. Health Minister Khalid Al-Taleb stated more vaccines deliveries will be coming over the next 3 months and add that the most important is that the campaign runs smoothly because their objective is to reach 80% of the population. The country has one of Africa's most advanced vaccination programs.
The most important policy for us is that this campaign should be gradual in getting and distributing the vaccine so that it takes place in a very organized manner. We are aiming for various categories, but gradually. We are expecting more deliveries of the vaccine during the month of February, March, and April. The most important is that the campaign runs smoothly because our objective is to reach 80% of the population as His Majesty wishes. This is over 30 million people. If we manage to reach this target and if everyone adheres to this campaign, then we will attain collective immunity.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I am Janet Perez Moya. Thank you for watching.